I figure it's time to take a look at some of the comments that have come in over the past few months. To anyone who's left a comment on any one of my videos, thank you. Thank you, frankly, for even watching them, but for commenting as well. You know, I that's a level of interest that is far beyond what I deserve. So thank you for having any comments at all, and taking the time to do so. So. I'm one of these old stick in the muds, and I don't quite understand what this Google Plus thing is. I know that YouTube keeps trying to force it on me, and because of that alone makes me more likely to distrust it. So I can't comment on any of your comments, I can't reply to any of your comments unless I have Google Plus, and at the moment I haven't got that. So what I'll do here is actually, it seems like a nice way to spend a few minutes. I can go through all of these comments and respond to them in person, in video. So yeah, we'll take a look at Cameron's email first. Have you had any issues with the Seagate 5TB drive in your Drobos since you installed it? Did the same installation of a 5D file last week, installing two 5TB expansion drives, and both of them failed within the first week. Ouch. Sympathies, Cameron. That doesn't sound like much fun. The rebuilding process completed, and sitting idle one failed, which I removed and replaced with the old 3TB. A few days later, the other one failed. I'm trying to narrow down whether it was something to do with this specific drive in the Drobo, or if I had two drives fail due to their own issues. Yeah, Cameron, good question. What I sometimes hold myself to is possibly is something of an old wives' tale, is that when I'm putting drives so say like into a NAS box like the Drobo, I tend to try and avoid having the same types of drives purchased at the same time, purely because there's a good chance that you may end up with drives of the same batch, and that drives of the same batch, if they should happen to be slightly more faulty or slightly more prone to failure than the next drive, then obviously, because these drives have basically been born and created and subjected to pretty much all the same conditions, if one's going to fail, there's a good chance the other one will as well. Which in a NAS scenario is obviously catastrophic, because obviously depending on the setting of your Drobo, you can set it for one or two drive redundancy, but if one fails, obviously that's going to that puts the immediate pressure on you to get a replacement drive into that machine as soon as possible. But it also means that while the drive array is rebuilding the existing drives, one of which will include obviously that other 5TB drive you've got there, it will put those other drives under increased pressure, and potentially if there is a chance of those drives from the same batch failing, it's going to turn up the pressure on the other one and could basically make that fail as well. If you've not got dual drive redundancy set up on the Drobo, then that's a bad time. You're going to have basically lost data. So it's I personally, I haven't had any issues with the Seagate drive. Then again, my Drobo, I tend to turn it on when I want to use it and turn it off when I've finished, which is probably not really the typical use case for most usage of Drobos and sort of like NAS drives in general. Normally you have a big array and you have it on all the time, certainly in any kind of business or professional setting, but in my case I sort of like use these NAS drives more for sort of like heavy archiving and that kind of thing, or just like where I've got a whole load of big files that I need to put somewhere, possibly even temporarily, or just recently, for example, I've got a Western Digital MyCloud drive which failed completely on me, and it was only ever used as a backup target. But obviously while I was in the process of sending that drive off to Western Digital and then getting a replacement back, the role it provided as the backup drive for all the other devices on my network meant that all the other devices on my network, of course, had no backup. So if they had failed as well, I would have had a bit of a hard time. So, for example, in that case, what I did was I repointed the more crucial storage on the rest of my network towards mirroring actually at the Drobo. So it was useful to actually have it as a sort of like a space storage of, for sort of ad hoc storage of a decent amount of space where I could dump something in an emergency, several terabytes at once. So it worked for me in that case anyway. But yeah, Cameron, say sympathies with your problem. I say I know what it's like losing any kind of drive at all. I know what a nuisance it is, which I suppose is, in a sense, it alludes to something I mentioned in one of my previous videos about like experience really coming from having made the mistakes in the past. I've made the mistake in the past of putting things on one drive and not having a backup, and then that drive failing. I think once most people have gone through that, they like rather more careful and they take backups a lot more than perhaps the next man. Yeah, experience, hard lesson, and no fun at all. But so in terms of your drive, it may be that you were just unlucky. It may be that you had a bad batch. Certainly I've been lucky, but I've not really been sort of like stressing these drives very much. It could be that they're actually not suited to Drobo, I don't know. But in my experience, I haven't had a problem so far anyway, so fingers crossed. Okay, next one, message from Marco. How long did it take eventually? Yeah, and Marco's talking about the 6 terabyte red drive that I pushed into the Drobo, and obviously when you do that, it takes a certain amount of time to go through the process of realigning and striping the data across all of the drives so that the data is adequately protected against any 1 or 2 drive failures. It was at one point it was saying something like 48 hours, but in the end it actually didn't take long. It was I think something like it must have been, I seem to recall that I left it overnight basically, and it was done by the morning. Which is fine. I mean, the Drobo dashboard does tend to give you a much more pessimistic view of how long something is going to take than it actually does. Sometimes it will say like, 48 hours or something. It's like horrendous. But genuinely, sort of like if it's not doing much, it doesn't take quite as long, and it revises its estimates down. We have a message from Ed. Thank you for posting this video. It certainly solved my problem. Ed, you're welcome. That's on my video about Macromedia Projector. Macromedia Projector has stopped working. Is a useless error message that you get if you try and install sort of like some really very recent HP printer scanner and printer drivers, and it certainly vexed me. And like when I looked around on the internet, there were so many people who seemed to be having the same problem, and there doesn't really seem to be actually any solution. I mean, even from Hewlett Packard themselves, which I thought was just like amazing that in this day and age they can actually ship driver packs that you just can't install. It seems nuts to me. But if you haven't seen the video, I'll actually save you some time and basically summarize it in 30 seconds or less. Basically, take the executable driver package, unzip it as if it were a zip file, and then run the installer manually, and then it works. So a nice little workaround. We have a message here from Scrono. Is the internal driver 5400 or 7200 RPM? That's a question on the Seagate 5 terabyte, and that is actually a very good question. I don't know. Let me take the front off my Drobo right now. Right, I've taken it out for you, and on the front it says absolutely nothing. Okay, I can't tell you. I imagine it's a 5400. I don't think it's a particularly speedy drive. I mean, obviously it's packaged in a USB enclosure, so it's probably not designed to be the fastest thing of all. And certainly the Seagate have actually Seagate have got some new drives out actually now. They've got the 8 terabyte, what they call an archive drive, which is apparently a 5900 RPM drive, which is sort of like a little odd, but clearly not by any means the fastest drive. But what I think is bringing all the horses to the yard is obviously the storage space. 8 terabytes on a single SATA drive is of interest of people who have an awful lot of data to store but don't necessarily need it instantly. Obviously 7200 RPM drive would be faster, 10,000 RPM drive would be faster still. But I suppose it's the trade-off you make between high capacity and instant storage. There has to be a line drawn somewhere. But as I say, Scrano, I actually honestly don't know. I'll tell you what, let me have a look. We have the internet here, we can find this stuff out. Let's see what it says. Google Seagate 5 terabyte drive specs. Something will tell us. This is a rather complicated way of me pointing you towards like a website like Let Me Google That For You, but that website is in some ways slightly what's the word I'm looking for here? Oh yes, that's right, insulting. Oh dear, we're not having a good time here. This is all gone terribly wrong. Okay. Well, that's the last time I try and look up the specs while I'm recording something, but a problem repeatedly occurred. Well, if a problem repeatedly occurred, then I'll take the hint. I'm sorry, Scrano, I can't answer your question. I'll see if I can find out, but my guess is it's 5400. Okay, next point. Andrew in the UK. Nice to meet you, Andrew. Noisy thing though, the fan is a nightmare on the 5D. Yeah, my 5, I've got the 5, that's the video about the 5S. Actually, no, it's not a 5S, is it? Your title says Drobo 5S when it should read Drobo 5D. I only find this video for another of yours. Oh, Andrew, thank you. Speed is slow compared to that of the Caldigit T3 or T4. Yes, people do seem to say actually that the speed performance of the Drobo is not necessarily perhaps what you could get from other devices. I think you may be absolutely on the money with that one. What attracts me basically to the Drobos is basically how easy it is to put in different kind of drives in different sizes, unequal sizes, to bring drives in and out at a moment's notice, that kind of thing. That really is what got my attention, and that's really the reason why I like the Drobo so much. I think if I were absolutely after the very fastest, the very blazingest performance, to be fair, what I know now is that the Drobo is possibly not the best choice for that, but it would come with the, as I say, possibly the downside that, you know, I would have to put in 4 drives of exactly the same size, wouldn't necessarily be able to change one of them out at any time, would have to replace any failed drives with another drive of the same size and pretty much the same specs, things like that. So I suppose again in some ways it's a trade-off. That said, my Drobo does not seem terribly noisy. I mean, it's actually been on in the background while I've been recording this. I don't know if you can hear it. Let me wham the microphone over to where the Drobo is. That's around the back and the front of the unit, and it's actually pretty quiet for me, or at least at the moment. I mean, admittedly, there's only 3 drives in that, but I mean that's that in that one. But yeah, it's actually I've not found noise to be a particular problem. Andrew, though, you do say your total says Drobo 5S when it should read Drobo 5D. My error. I can only apologise for that. Let me do something about that right away. I can actually change it while you're watching, and a problem has occurred, so the page has been reloaded, and Safari, oh god, why is this happening? There was me thinking, I can just change that, I can just fix that, and it'll be fine. Shall I give it a go? Shall I see if I can go to that let's go to the video manager. Drobo 5S, edit. I love the way that YouTube offers me the chance to improve the video, because it basically says, oh, your video is very shaky, maybe you should do something about that. Yeah, it's probably not completely wrong, but right. Drobo 5S becomes Drobo 5D. Andrew, thank you very much for the tip. And back we go to the comments. So, Mr. Dave. Hello, Mr. Dave. Seriously, you're a likely candidate to end up with a screwdriver embedded in your handwork like that. I used expired credit cards for doing this, just as effective and much safer. Dave, you're probably not completely wrong. Opening a USB drive shell enclosures with a screwdriver is probably not the optimum. I'll try your tip of expired credit cards actually, as I do have a drawer full of them. I'll do that next time perhaps. See if that works. But you know, screwdrivers, whatever works. It wasn't. It was not a particularly considered or well thought through experiment, as is the case with most of the things I do. So yeah, thank you for that. Jackie comments on the fixing Macromedia projector, the HP drivers thing. Thank you, Jackie. Thank you for your comment. So Townie is talking about 5TB Seagates. Can't wait, getting 4 of these beauties on Black Friday. $139 each. Can't not upgrade my 3x4 terabyte drives in HTPC for that price. Yeah, exactly. You can't really argue with that. It's a good amount of storage, and especially in a home theatre PC, I mean, like, more storage is more better. I was really kicking around the idea of putting together like a build of a really monster, absolutely stupidly specified home theatre PC with like 30 terabytes of storage and 120 cable tuners and all that kind of nonsense. kind of didn't get round to it, because actually when although I wouldn't mind building that just for the fun of it, the actual cost of spending all the money and buying all of that would leave me with something which at the end of the build I wouldn't actually really get any serious use out of. I do have a couple of home theatre PCs. I mean, I do use Windows Media Center. I might get a chance to make some videos about that in the future. Windows Media Center, yeah, nice. I like it. It works for me anyway. I did look at stuff like Myth TV and XBMC, and couldn't quite get my head around what was required there. I did spin up a couple of virtual machines with various installs and various like client server combinations of Myth TV, and sometimes I could get it to work and sometimes I couldn't, and that's probably something that I'd like to experiment more with in the future, so I might take a look at that. Mike White on the HP drivers, thank you, Mike, thank you. I'm glad it worked for you. Right, and also another comment, Mas Familia Senation. Gracias. Well, Mas Familia, thank you very much indeed. So, what else have we got? We got a comment from Winand. Great video. Oh, Winand, thank you. You know, that's much too kind. It's great is something I can only aspire to. I mean, this is just a video that I made, but I have old drives in my 5B, but I'm worried about data rot even with the duplication option. Drobo doesn't give us any sector reports or information about its data scrubbing. Very good point. That's actually a comment that there's a lot of really good sort of like hacker conference videos on YouTube. One name in particular that you really must look for is Travis Goodspeed. His talks are amazing and really interesting. And one of the subjects he touched on, he has a whole presentation about building an actively anti-forensic hard drive that sort of like resists attempts to be imaged and should it fall into the hands of an adversary who you do not wish to know what's on your hard drive. And one of the points he makes is that basically you have no way to really scrub your hard drives because there's so much intelligence going on under the hood when it's like reallocating sectors. If it writes part of your data to a sector and then a bit later it finds it can't read it back, then it kind of like recovers that sector and it marks the bad sector as bad and it never uses it again, and it puts it moves your data over to another sector. But of course, in the meantime, this means that once those sectors are marked bad, what's on them will never be touched because the drive is not going to try to write to those sectors ever again, and your PC won't know that that particular physical sector is bad because the drive does all the hard work of like abstracting that so that you actually never get to see it. You don't know there's bad sectors on your hard drive, or at least not if you go looking, and you certainly don't know where they are. If you try to write that physical sector, the drive will say, "Oh no, that's a bad sector." But I put the data on that drive on that sector somewhere else. So I'll interpret your request as a write for that bad sector to a write for the good sector where I actually stored the same data. So in a sense, you will always have some risk of never being able to completely scrub drives in any way whatsoever. And actually, you're talking about data scrubbing, which is the process of just like reading and rewriting stuff to the drives to make sure that they're good. So, you see, this is the problem. I have like a half an idea of what people are talking about, and suddenly I go off like completely the wrong tangent. So, I'm sorry about that. So yeah, data scrubbing. Yeah, good point. I suppose you never really know what it's doing. Particularly in the Drobos case. I mean, if you're absolutely a glutton for giving your drives a workout, you can always start just taking drives out randomly. That will certainly cause it to read and rewrite and stuff. It's like all across the existing drives in the array, but it's not terribly scientific. It's not by any means guaranteed. So yeah, good point. I wonder if you could benchmark your setup with old drives, maybe take some really old drives and punish it with a couple of petabytes with some HDD benchmarking softwares. After a while one could test its consistency. Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I don't think anything like this is done, and it will give us some indication if using old drives in Drobos should be done at all. Yeah, that sounds like fun. When I get some time, and when I can devote a decent amount of time to actually just setting it up, leaving it running, and see what happens. Perhaps we'll do that. We'll actually have an old hard drive destruction test. we will hammer that array so hard and see basically what drives squeak first. That sounds like a lot of fun. I might actually take the two. I think I put two newer 2 terabytes drives in that old array just for the purposes of that video, but I could always take that out and like have it as like a genuine sort of like a test of an array of drives at least 5-6 years old or more. It's like, and try and give it like a real destruction test and see how Drobo deals with it. That might be a lot of fun. Winan, thank you. That's a great idea. Let me see what I can do with that. Message from Phil Smith. Thanks for the video. I have a Drobo 5D with 5 4TB drives and it's full. But since there's no official support, I was reluctant to install some 6TB, so now I guess I can. Yeah, this is actually a really interesting point you make, Phil, is that sort of like Drobo's support of larger drives appears to have been completely silent. They will say like, oh yes, we support up to 4 TB, and obviously, I mean, as you've seen, like certainly from my videos and like from other people's videos, 5 and 6 TB drives do work. We know they work, or at least they appear to work. I say that. I mean, I may be cruising for an absolute catastrophic loss of data, and at that point, Drobo will say like, oh no, well, you see, if you read the small print, it's not supported. There could be a danger in that, but certainly 5 and 6 TB drives, they seem to work quite nicely. I mean, if I can ever get hold of one of those Seagate 8 TB archive drives, I'd like to give that a try in the Drobo as well. They're apparently not going to hit the stores until probably sort of like mid-January as far as I can see, but yeah, I wouldn't mind having a go at that at some point and see. But yeah, Phil, good luck with your Drobo. What else we got here? We have a thread. We have a comment thread from Lucky Pilgrim. Why are you doing this? Yes, you raise an excellent point. you raise an excellent point, Lucky Pilgrim. That's a perfectly fair question. To be fair, as Andy Cook comments, I did actually say why in the first 20 seconds of the video, but no one listens to me, and nobody should. So you're absolutely it's a perfectly fair question. The answer, of course, is that you just can't get those 5 TB drives on their own outside of USB enclosures at the moment for some reason. To be fair, at the time I made that video, 5 TB was the largest drive you could buy. Or I think I'm right in saying that. Anyway, I don't think the 6 TB drives, the Western Digital Red that I used in one of the later videos, I don't think that was available at the time. I could be wrong, but it certainly wasn't cheap anyway. The 6 TB drive when I finally got hold of it. Yeah, that's basically why. If certain types of drives only exist in USB caddies and you can't buy them separately, then you've got to buy them in USB caddies and take the caddies off. Although, as Mr. Dave commented earlier, perhaps be a bit more careful with the screwdriver than I was. Fair enough. Super Cooled. Hello, Super Cooled. Hi, Mr. Antbox. What alternatives had you considered when you finally decided on the B900FS? I've heard good and bad things about this unit. I'm thinking about getting this sort of Synology unit. Any thoughts? Yeah. Synology, I hear people say lots of good things about them. I think there's been a certain amount of controversy recently. I think it's Synology. I could be wrong. Excuse me if I am wrong, but I seem to recall that there was some talk about them not keeping the units really as up to date with firmware and software updates as they should do, and I think there was apparently some vulnerability with the recent Heartbleed security issue. It may be Synology, it may be somebody else. Apologies if I've got that wrong, but I do seem to remember that there were some people complaining about that just recently. But apart from that, I mean, in actual use, I mean, the people I know who have Synology units, they swear by them. They absolutely love them. And as I mentioned earlier, I mean, in my case, I mean, I went for the Drobo because I want to be able to slam any old drive in it, and I want to be able to have a 1 TB drive and a 6 TB drive and a 500 gig drive, and I just want to be able to slam any drive I've got into those units and for them to work and for it to be okay. Whereas I think I'm right in saying, again, I could be wrong. I don't have personal experience with this, but I don't think the Synology units are quite that tolerant. I think they're much more in terms of like conventional RAID arrays that if you're going to if it's like a 5-bay drive, if it's a 5-bay enclosure, you've got to put 5 drives in it, and they've got to be all the same size. You can't sort of like start off with one and then add more drives when you can afford them. You can't start off with one and then put in other drives of different sizes later. Or you can, but if you do that, you've got to take all the data off the array first, copy it somewhere else, stick the new drives in, reformat it, reprovision it, and then copy all the data back again. That's the one thing that Drobo does have going for it, is that obviously you don't have to do that. It will kind of like handle all that by itself. on the negative side, you know, yeah, slow. And some people have questions about the reliability as well. I've been lucky; I've not had any problems with that. But yeah, there's thoughts on good and bad thoughts on both sides. But certainly, I mean, I think if you do go for the Synology, I think you'll be absolutely happy with that. Likewise, I think you'll probably be absolutely happy with the Drobo, or indeed anything else. I mean, I think really, you know, have a look around, see what other people say. From what I hear about what other people say about the Synology is, you know, they don't have a bad word to say about them, and you know, that can only be a good thing. Marta says thank you. Marta, I'm glad your scanner is working. And as we get to the bottom of the page, we get to our comment from Sean. Sean, thank you again for your comment. I actually answered Sean's comment in one of the later videos, but that makes it nonetheless still equally as appreciated. And his point about the 8TB of drive coming out, will I make a video about it? If I can actually ever lay my hands on any kind of 8TB drive, I'd be delighted to make a video about it. But for the moment, that seems to be all the comments. So I mean, again, for anyone who's made any comments to any of my videos, you know, thank you for even watching the videos in the first place. I mean, genuinely, I've just been, you know, uploading these. I've made no effort to tell anybody what these videos are or where they are, or to get anyone to watch them. So the fact that anyone has found them in the first place, and the fact that anyone has stuck with them for more than about 10 seconds is, you know, is genuinely nice of you. So, you know, I appreciate it, and thank you for that. So if anyone's got any more comments on anything, and any other videos made recently, you know, please feel free. Even if I don't necessarily respond on the comments because of the Google Plus funkiness, I'm pretty sure that I'll find some way of replying in one of these videos. So thank you again, and well, I'll see you soon.